Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the HR Buddy HR and Employment Law Update for January 2026. You're all very welcome this morning. HR Buddy, of course, is an Irish-based HR consultancy, payroll provider, and HR software company. I'm joining you this morning from the Killarney offices. However, HR Buddy, we work nationally to deliver flexible HR solutions to companies of all sizes and across many sectors in Ireland, as well as supporting overseas companies with EOR services. Today, you're joining us for the very first webinar of 2026, and important to say that if you want to stay updated with the latest developments in the HR space, you can sign up to our monthly newsletter or mailing list, and you can sign up at the website below, or you can just drop us a line here at info@hrbuddy.ie to stay informed on all things HR and employment law. Now, for this very first webinar of the year, we have some very timely topics to discuss with you. I'm glad to say we are joined by HR Buddy Managing Director Damien McCarthy this morning. Damien is going to run through some of the key developments and need to knows for your HR agenda for the year ahead. Good morning, Damien.
Thanks, Colin. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Great engagement in the new year for our first webinar of 2026. So Happy New Year to you all. I hope you and your families all had a very good Christmas, New Year, and wishing you all the best, both personally and in your professions for the year ahead. I'm going to run through I suppose essentials, especially from the point of view of employment law for 2026, and in particular, I suppose having a look at ensuring that you stay compliant, that you're aware of the legislative changes coming, what to keep an eye out for. I suppose in particular, ensuring that you're communicating these changes with your staff and that you're staying compliant with regards to your documentation, your employment documentation, employment contracts, staff handbooks, and so on. Because very many, I suppose, of the mistakes that are made in employment relationships is where reviews and updating of the terms and conditions of employment haven't been looked after. It's, I suppose, increasingly difficult given the amount of changes to employment law that is happening. So if you just roll it on there, Colin, and we'll try and get into this. The kind of first thing to I suppose you are already aware of it is my future fund pension auto enrollment. That has started. The big thing to be aware of, though, just in case you do have private pensions and you didn't have employees auto-enrolled, and I'll dig into this a little bit more in a minute, but is that statutory instrument that was implemented just a few days before Christmas, okay? And it's important, I suppose, from the point of view that it is a criminal offence if you don't meet the requirements on that and the 3.5% threshold. The other thing that is very current is the new retirement legislation, and I suppose and I'll speak about it a bit more in a minute as well, but I suppose to put it in plain language, this is where if you have retirement terms and conditions and retirement ages in your employment contracts that would say something like 65, I suppose it's increasingly difficult to have a retirement age that doesn't match the state pension age of 66 now. And there is new legislation signed in that regard into law by President Connolly only last week, I think it was. We're waiting for a commencement order on that, but that is incoming. So that is something to keep an eye on. A big thing in 2026 is also the classification of workers, and most definitely contract workers, contractor agreements. Again, it's under the new legislation, it is increasingly difficult, whereby really it is presumed that there is an employment relationship. I'm going to go through the calendar in a minute, and we'll have a look at what we need to look out for that. My colleague Breach Fallon will be talking to you later. She's going to go through the Pay Transparency Directive, which we're going to see due to come in under the EU directive, and really that is a biggie. So we'll go into the meat of that with Breach in a while. Also in June, you're going to see proposed amendments to family law leave and equality legislation. We don't know a great deal on that because they are only at proposal stages. But again, there's an EU directive whereby there is going to be amendments and enhancements to areas of, around pregnancy, loss leave, leave for health screening purposes and that type of thing. Okay, we'll just move it on there again, Colin. So just taking a look at the calendar, because a lot of us like to look at things in real time and it helps us to get organized. January is a good time for planning. We all do it with the best of intentions, but I suppose we get busy, and we can leave things slide. So I suppose to set out here the dates, we know that pension auto enrollment is in. We know that we need to look at retirement, and I'll speak more about those things in a minute. But the other area here is if you have contractor workers and contractor agreements, there is an amnesty in January. So if you have contractor agreements and you're in doubt about those, and I suppose we see this in HR Buddy every day, where there is contractor agreements with workers who really, if it was tested, they are employees and they should have employment contracts. You have the opportunity, an amnesty opportunity in this month in January. If you have made a mistake, if you have made an error and you have someone in a contractor agreement, and they should be in an employment contract with the employer, you have an opportunity to go to revenue and report that. And that means that, you won't suffer the penalties and so on that will come into play down the line. I'll go through everything inside in the middle of that sandwich in a minute, but if you go to the last month of the year in December 2026, we will have the Platform Workers Directive deadline. So that's where it will be presumed, that it is employment for gig workers unless proven otherwise. So there's big changes coming in this area, and I suppose what I'm saying this morning, examine this if you have contractor workers. Is it going to be presumed that you have control of them? I suppose in the past, if you had a contractor agreement signed by both parties, the employee and the employer, that held an awful lot of power, that both parties had entered into a contractor agreement, even if there was a lot of control by the employer on the contractor worker. Okay, that just isn't going to wash under the new legislation. So there's a big move and big changes here with regards to legislation in 2026. I think it's important in January, if you're in these types of situations, if you have workers under contractor agreements, to review it. And I suppose make sure you're compliant in the future and that you're not going to face taxes and penalties and so on, and paying interest on that worker in the future. In March, we're going to see employment permit threshold increases. So currently, and we deal with, I suppose, an awful lot of employment permits for our clients and so on, especially with I suppose, the stretched labour market over the last number of years, and the fact that, in fairness, our economy is going well. We do see overseas workers coming in to Ireland, and a need for that in industry from employers. Currently, the general work permit threshold is at 34K per year. That's going to increase to 36,605 in March. The critical skills permit is currently at 38K per year. That's going to increase to 40,904. They decided to not give us round numbers in the increase, so thanks for that. And then there are specific roles like healthcare, home care assistants, meat and horticulture employees. That's currently on 30K per annum. That's going to increase to 32,691. Okay, so there are increases to be aware of if you, if you are using the employment permit system and bringing, I suppose, workers from other countries into your employment, and you're applying for work permits. It's important that you're aware, because you don't want to waste time on not meeting the threshold from March onwards. So again, keep an eye on that. we will be running monthly webinars, by the way, throughout the year. So I suppose an awful lot of these employment law changes, they're ongoing. We don't have the full information. They're at proposal stages, many of them. I suppose the finite details and clarifications on the legislation once it's introduced, as always, can be kind of last minute and so on. And indeed, you can see, I suppose, added legislation and statutory instruments being implemented as well, where there may be some legislative loopholes, which has happened with the pension auto enrollment, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So things can be ongoing. So again, look, we'll run the HR Buddy webinars every month, and we'll keep you updated. And again, as Colin says, if you want to be on our newsletter list, or if you need our services and you need to speak with one of our experts, please give us a call or an email. Breach will go through and again, this is huge. This is a big one. It's there inside the summer, which I never like legislation being introduced during the summertime, because an awful lot of industries are very busy. I suppose earlier in the year or later in the year are usually better. But we're going to really keep an eye on the Pay Transparency Directive. I suppose under EU legislation, again, that has to be transposed into Irish law by the 7th of June. It will require pay ranges being advertised in your job advertisements, ban of pay history questions inside in recruitment and in interviews, and a mandate to access the pay data and joint pay assessments. So what I would say here is now is the time to prepare for this, not in June or July. Okay, we will get more information once the legislation is coming in, especially with regards to things like salary ranges being advertised and all that type of thing. But for the moment, what I would stress this morning is get yourself ready for this now, because June, July, August is too late. I suppose you may have already shot yourself in the foot. You may already be getting it wrong, and you're at the point of no return. So now is the time to prepare for employers for the Pay Transparency Directive, which it looks like it should be in by June. Very often when these things come in, they can run a little late and be a month or two behind. So most definitely get planning now, and it's something to keep an eye on. Breach will also talk about gender pay gap reporting. I suppose the big thing here, and the question is, and the question mark there is, are you a 50 plus employer? And if you are, and you're somewhere in between 50 and 150, well then you should be publishing your gender pay gap reports for 2025. You should have done that in November of 2025, and you're going to do it again in November of 2026. Colin will demo our HR Buddy Manager system, and it's one of the things that we really wanted to do with the software, is to ensure that businesses in particular, I suppose those smaller employers of 50, 60, 70 and 80 people could have the technology and software to be able to develop their gender pay gap reporting and do that efficiently and easily without it being a big headache every year. And Colin will go through a little bit of that later on when he shows you the HR Buddy Manager software. And then at the end of the year, and I spoke about this, again, your contractor workers, it's something to think about, I think, after this webinar this morning. If you have contractor workers, you need to address that situation. You need to review it. Are you going to meet the legislative requirements in 2026 that are being implemented? So just roll on there again, Colin. So I suppose planning for the year ahead, the statutory instrument with regards to pension auto enrollment is very, very important. Are you meeting that? If you do have private pension schemes, I'll run through that more in a minute. Breed is going to go through some of the, I suppose, national minimum wages and employment regulation orders information there in a minute for you. Breed will also discuss the Transparency Directive. So I suppose pay attention to that. And as I said, you need to plan for that now. From a compliance point of view, I would say there are many things with regards to employment law that have happened in 2025 and happening in 2026, which will very quickly outdate your terms and conditions of employment with your employees, with your company policies in your staff handbook. One example that we have seen is workplaces with employment contracts or staff handbooks that specify sick pay days at 7 days in 2026, or sorry, in 2025 and 10 days in 2026 because of what was proposed through the legislation for statutory sick pay, which then ended up being put on pause and is still on pause. And all the indications from Minister Peter Burke is that there are no plans to increase the statutory sick pay at this point. It remains on 5 days in 2026. So I suppose one question for you, is that what your contracts are saying? And is that what your staff handbook is saying? And there could be mistakes there because we have seen it. Because of course the plan was that it would be rolled forward 7 days and 10 days, which didn't happen, and the pause has been put on it, and there's no indications that it will be on pause. So things like this are happening. It's happening with retirement as well. Have you a retirement age in your employment contracts and staff handbooks that is under 66? Again, you're going to have to review that and plan, and it's looking after your documentation and not making mistakes in that regard as well. Because I suppose if you have someone working for you for 20, 25, 30 years, and you've had a good employment relationship, the last thing you want is confusion at the end of their career when they're coming towards retirement. And I suppose the fallout or things turning nasty or turning sour. That's a pity. So I suppose when we don't take the time to plan and review these things, mistakes can be made, and that causes relationship issues in the workplace. And we do want to avoid that if we can. What's also very important that I would stress and make this point as well is that your managers and line managers and operations managers can't be blinded, I suppose from CEO level or the HR department and so on. If your line manager and your people managers aren't aware of legislative changes, aren't educated in that, are communicating them wrongly, or aren't fully abreast of your workplace policies and your terms and conditions of employment with the people that they are working with and managing every day, that leads to problems. So manager training and educating them in your policies and in the legislative changes and being compliant is very, very important. We just roll it there again, Colin, please. With regards to pension auto enrolment, it's been implemented, hopefully, for anyone who has employees who are auto enrolled. It's going smoothly for you. I think, in fairness, it probably has gone smoother than what a lot of people anticipated or forecasted. There's just one thing to make you aware of, because, a few days before Christmas, there was and I had a piece of legislation to this, and we're talking here about workplaces and employers that would have had private pension scheme arrangements with their employees, and therefore the presumption was that those employees would not be auto-enrolled. Now, I suppose there was something called out on this. I thought it was reported unfairly because, again, as usual in the media and by politicians, they play the populist card, and they kind of insinuate that employers are doing something wrong. But I suppose we're all used to that at this stage. But the insinuation was that there was employers who had employees in private pension scheme arrangements that were less favourable to the pension auto-enrolment. So the statutory instrument piece of legislation that was implemented just in the run-up to Christmas, basically, you have to meet a 3.5% threshold. Okay. If you have a private pension scheme, the employer must pay at least 1.5% pension contribution, and the makeup of the 3.5% then by the employee must meet 3.5%. Where can you find issues with this? You may find an issue with this where an employer is in a private pension scheme arrangement, they're contributing 2%. It's in existence for a few years. The employee is paying 2%, so you think it's 4%. But the employee has had salary increases maybe over the last number of years, and now you fall under the 3.5% threshold. That would mean the employee should be on pension auto-enrolment. There is a criminal conviction that follows this, and there is a maximum fine of €5,000. So again, I suppose the timing of the pension auto enrollment when it's implemented, on the 1st of January, most of us are busy with different things. A lot of workplaces are only coming back to work after Christmas break or busy over the Christmas period if they are working and so on. This is something, again, you should examine, okay, and make sure that you're meeting the requirements on that on this, because again, there is a criminal conviction with it and so on. Okay, Colin, we'll move it on there. And just important to touch on the Employment Contractual Retirement Ages Act 2025. It's signed into law by Catherine Connolly. We're awaiting the commencement order, okay, which should come very shortly. So I suppose, keep an eye on our social pages, keep an eye on our newsletters. Um, Please come back to our monthly webinars and we'll fill you in on all the updates and an awful lot of this employment legislation that is being introduced. I suppose the information and the clarities with regards to it are ongoing. But basically, with regards to retirement age, what I would say is, the days of having a retirement age of 60 or 65 employment contracts really is gone, because if it's tested, it's going to be very difficult to prove that it's fair to have a retirement age that doesn't match the state pension age of 66. So again, review your employment documentation. I suppose if it's tested, it's hard to legitimately show objective justification as to why someone should retire. It may be on health and safety grounds or something like that, which, okay, maybe fair enough. But again, that's going to be difficult to prove and test it. The other thing to watch out for here is we are awaiting development of a code of practice from the WRC, which will give us more help and guidance, obviously, on the management of employment contractual retirement ages and the legislation that is incoming over the next few weeks. But that code of practice as well will help us. And again, we'll look at that code of practice for you when it's released. We'll examine it, review it, and we'll communicate it to you through our socials, to all our clients, through our newsletters, and hopefully maybe this time next month in our February webinar, we might have more information on that. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand you back to Colin, and Breach has plenty more to go through with you. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks a million, Damien, and a huge amount of information covered there. And as you touched on, a major talking point this year is the whole area of pay transparency. And I'm glad to say we are joined by our colleague, Breach Fallon, this morning, HR business consultant with HR Buddy, to discuss pay transparency as well as some other key and timely updates for 2026. Good morning, Breach.
Hi, Colin. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. And I also want to say thanks to Damien for covering some of my areas for me. So he's made my job a little bit easier this morning. I'm going to take you through the absence management changes in the national minimum wage, statutory sick pay, ERO updates, and then the transparency directive that we've touched on. So regarding absence management, it's very important, as you all know, to have a clear absence policy in place and to make sure that your contract of employment and your employee handbook is clearly laid out and that employees know what is expected of them, so that they know what the notification procedures are if they're sick, about sending in certs, about procedures, about, for example, can they send a text message? Can they not? Do they have to have a phone call, and by what time? They sound very simple things, but it's important to have them laid out for the employees so that they are aware of that. Regarding return to work protocols, we recommend it's always important to have one, even after a day or after a week of being out. If it's after a day, it's only like an informal chat to see how they're doing and to see, if they need anything or any assistance. It also acts as a deterrent if like employees are out and they know each time that they have to have that chat with their manager. After a week is important as well if someone's out for a week or more, because if it's reoccurring short absences, it's important that you check is there any support measures or anything that you can do to help the employee. Long-term absence is here. Just to let you know about that is if an employee is out for a long period of time, it's important to write to them. Well, obviously, phone them first. You can write to them and you can ask them to come in for a welfare meeting that you want to check in, see how they're doing. Is it possible for them to return to work or any support measures that need to be put in place? At that meeting, you can also possibly discuss the option of a company doctor appointment and discuss that with them and then follow up again at a later stage. When you're sending them to the company doctor, if that's the route you're going down, it's important to specify to the doctor what exactly you want assessed and asking those key questions. Are they able to do their job? And outlining what exactly that job is and over and back. And the employee will get a copy of that company doctor report as well. It's important to have a balanced and empathetic approach and put reasonable adjustments in place. Employee assistance and programs is outlined there in the slide, and that's also very important in a lot of workplaces would have them as part of your BHI or your Leah or your Irish Life or whatever it is. Health package that you have within your company. I think a lot of employees as well will be worried about the employee assistance program, thinking that if they called the nurse, for example, or the doctor online, or there's a counsellor, that the employer can see that information, and they can't. So it's a fantastic service to offer your employees, and we'd really recommend it because employees often need supports for various different topics. So it's a really good option to have in place. Time and attendance tracking is really important within your company, data analysis and review. So, for example, if you have a lot of absence within the company, for example, somebody could be out on Mondays, or they could be out following each bank holiday, just to keep track of that and keep a note of it. And then meet with the employee, have a welfare meeting and talk to them and flag it to them, because they might not think it's noticed, but it is. So it's really important to do all those things, which will help yourself. The Organisation Working Time Act is also referred to as there as well. So that's just important to be aware of that and have that quoted within your employee handbook and the contract. So just moving on then to the statutory sick pay, just to make everybody aware that it's still at 5 days per calendar year, the statutory sick pay. We're even getting queries today, even people are just wondering, has it changed? Because it was due to go up to 7 days last year in 2025 and 10 days in 2026 this year. So that is still the case. It is still at 5 days, and that has not changed. So that is just to be aware of that, and that it's 70% of gross earnings and up to €110 per day it's capped at. Also, it's important in your employee handbook or your contract that you have it referenced that there is a 13 weeks continuous employment period that they have to have in order to get it. And also that if you have your own sick pay scheme in place within the company, outline what that is in the employee handbook or the contract, and outline what the certification procedures are, when they need to hand in the cert and at what point. Also, it's very important to say that the employees, say with the statutory sick pay, have to give in that cert on day one of the absence. And if they don't, there is no entitlement to pay for that, so that they have to provide that, and they should be aware of that. So that's why, again, it's important to have it outlined in your documentation. So it employs to both full and part-time employees, and there are penalties, as I said, for non-compliance, and employees need to be aware of that, to have that in your documentation. So that's the update there. Then moving on to the national minimum wage and ERO updates. I don't want to bore you too much with all these figures, but the main thing to know here is for the national minimum wage has increased to 14.15 per hour. Just to be aware of that. And also, if you are an employer and you're in an industry where your employees work Sundays, it's important to have in your contract or the handbook that especially the contract, that if they work at the Sundays, that they will receive a Sunday premium, and outline what it is. But we would often recommend that Sunday premium should be covered in the rate of pay. It just makes wages easier for your payroll person. So if the minimum wage is 14.15 per hour, you could have 14.30 or 14.45 or whatever that rate is that suits yourself. But it's important to have that in. Then under 18s as well, that's $9.91 now per hour, and also to quote the Sunday premium is important for that as well if they're doing it. And also to be aware when you're doing contracts for under 18s, it's important to have particular clauses in that contract about their breaks and so on. So If you need assistance or advice on that, to come back to us. The security industry ERO came into effect in July 25. The contract cleaning was October 25 that it came in, and then early learning and childcare ERO, the dates are there as well. That was 13th of October 25. There is a lot within the ERO and all that information. So if you need or have any particular questions in relation to that, please do contact us and we'd be happy to help. So moving on to the next one, which is the EU Pay Transparency Directive. So this is an interesting topic. And it is currently in the pipeline at the moment. The date is the 7th of June that we have been given, all European countries and including Ireland, to incorporate it into law. So the directive was adopted by the EU Parliament in 23, and then we have until 26 to get it into law. So it's passed, it's not yet passed by the Oireachtas, so the legislation is currently being drawn up. I suppose the purpose of it is really to promote equal pay for equal work. It's to reduce the gender pay gap. It will really strengthen employee rights. They're going to have a lot of rights in relation to, like what Damien has already touched on about pay data and salary ranges and so on. So, it's obviously going to increase employer obligations. So, as Damien mentioned, we should be really preparing now as employers, and you should be looking at your salary ranges and all the different areas so that you are prepared for that deadline. I have included there that the Netherlands has already requested a 6-month extension beyond the 26th deadline. There's nothing in the pipeline for that to happen with Ireland, but it's just important, I thought, to write that down and highlight it, because you saw what happened with the pension auto-enrollment. That's just come into place now. And then we saw what happened with the statutory sick pay, that was supposed to be increasing, and it's still at the original 5, well, it was 3 days, but it's at the 5 days. So it's important to keep that in the back of your head, but still, you should still prepare, but just highlighting that. It applies to all employees and not covered or self-employed and the contractors. So all employees must be prepared, all employers must be prepared for transparency as outlined. So just moving on to the next slide then. So the key requirements that will come under this are pay structures. So it's important to have equal pay for equal work. So if you've, say, a team of 5 software engineers, to make sure that you look, at their genders and what are they on and what are their ranges. So you can't really have them with the same male and a female, and there's a significant difference in their salary ranges. So you need to be able to justify why that would be. Perhaps one has a master's or one has 10 years experience and the other has 2 years experience. So you need to be looking at your pay structures and putting them in place. The gender pay gap reporting is another requirement of this, but that's going to be annually for 50 plus employees. So Ireland implemented the gender pay gap reporting in 2022, and I suppose it's from 2025, it's for workplaces with, say, 50 plus employees. So that's the gender pay gap reporting, and that will really, that's uploaded now onto the website, so employees can see what the different earnings are for those different categories. The job advertisement. So as of the 7th of June, if you're an employer, you must be outlining what the salary range is for that particular job. So it's going to be the salary range, or it's going to be the exact salary, what the exact salary for that role will be. This is all still in the pipeline. Like I said, it's been at the Oireachtas at the moment. The legislation is being drawn up. But like Damien mentioned, we will be doing monthly webinars. So when we have more and clear information about what exactly is required, that will be furnished to you at these monthly webinars. So keep an eye on that. But at the moment, like they're saying that if it is a salary range, that like it might have to be dependent on years of experience, or else it might be the exact salary level. So they're kind of saying one or the other. So in interviews, you won't be permitted anymore to ask about what's someone currently earning or what was their previous salary. And pay secrecy clauses are prohibited. So currently, employees should not be talking to one another about what salary they're on and so on, whereas that will not be allowed anymore, and that's prohibited going forward from the 7th of June. the pay data request. So employees may request the average pay levels broken down by gender for employees doing the same work or work of equal value. And the employer must respond within 2 months. So that's it's important that employers are also prepared for that and that they know how to do that. So when someone does come and ask them for that pay data, so, for example, some employers have said to me, well, there's only five, for example, software engineers on the team. And if I have to give that information, they're going to be able to see or make an educated guess. And yes, that is the case. That they will be able to take an educated guess. So that's why it's important that you're getting all this sorted out now and you're looking at your salaries and you're making sure that everybody's in line and that it's equal. And then if it's not, that you can justify that. And it has to be very objective reasons. So that's the requirements. And then moving on to the next one is the joint pay assessments. So this is triggered when there's a 5% plus gender pay gap exists in a category. So the company would have to do a pay audit or a joint pay assessment in conjunction with their staff. So the gap cannot be justified. It's when the gap cannot be justified, like I mentioned before, by gender neutral reasons. For example, there's a 10K gap, but you can be able to justify it by, you can't justify it by, say, the experience or the qualifications or the seniority or additional duties, then you are in trouble. And that's why you'd have to have this joint pay assessment then. So to avoid all that, it's really important to look at the salaries and the ranges now and make sure that everybody is similar or that you can justify that for whatever that reason is. Assessment, identify causes and corrective measures and timelines. So that must be put in place if you can't justify it or explain it, you must put the timeline in place by when it will be sorted. And the gap, if it's not corrected within 6 months of the gender pay gap report, that's when this joint pay assessment takes place. So moving on to the next slide then is about gender pay gap data can create a prima facie evidence supporting employee claims. So this was the part when I mentioned at the start that employees are going to have a lot more rights now. So when they get this gender pay gap information or they get the salary sales or salary ranges of people in their department, that will give them clear information and that can give rise to, challenges for pay practices and they can take cases to the WRC. So it's very important that robust documentation is in place for the employer and that you can justify that. I have an example on the next slide for you, which is about, say, a female supervisor. So she reviews the gender pay gap report and she shows a 10% male pay advantage. So then she requests the average pay data for her category under the directive, which she's allowed to do. And then it's confirmed men in the same category earn more. So this creates prima facie equal pay case. So she can then take a case to the WRC, and when she does that, the outcome, like I suppose the burden shifts to the employer and he must justify the difference, which is in those, what I mentioned earlier. He has to be able to justify the difference. Why is that? This person has a master's, this person has 10 years experience, whereas she has 2 years experience and so on. So you have to be able to justify what it is and you have to be able to stand up against it. Then moving on is the next one there. So the employer obligations. So this is all not set out yet because it's with the Oireachtas and it's not set out in legislation, but we will keep you up to date on our monthly webinars as it all unfolds, I suppose. But the employer must show the differences are based on objective gender neutral criteria, as I previously mentioned. And the employer must provide written evidence of the pay decisions. Failure to justify will create risks of equal pay awards, full recovery. So it could be a full recovery of back pay, bonuses and payments in kind and compensation to the employee. So that's what the employee may get if they win the case. But like I said, it's not set out yet and we will be getting more information from that in the future about what the penalties for non-compliance will be. But to avoid all that, that's, as Damien mentioned earlier, it's really important to start now, start preparing and looking at your employees and trying to see, are you paying them the right and similar? And if you're not, you have to be able to justify it. So you're kind of your future proofing yourself and helping yourself to avoid costly cases in the future. And then just moving on to the last one, I think, would be next steps, I suppose, for employers would be to examine pay structures, identify equal work categories, ensure pay variations are justified, add pay transparency to job adverts. That will be from the 7th of June. Review salaries, review recruitment practices, and review reporting practices. So that's important to keep in mind those points. Compliance would be review your current policies and practices, review gender pay gap reporting, and prepare systems for responding to pay requests. So that because you will get these requests in the future, and it's important that that you have maybe a standard reply so that because employees are going to be able to talk to one another about what they're earning, keep that in mind as well, and they will be. So it's important that one didn't get one sort of a general reply email and the other person didn't get another reply that was worded differently. So just having all those practices in place and being prepared and training your managers on equal pay and transparency obligations so that managers are aware as well. Their managers are really key here so that they know what to say to an employee when they're put on the spot and they know about all these topics. So as we mentioned earlier, we are available to answer any questions that you have at the end, or you can always follow up with us afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Breach. So again, huge amount of information and a lot covered, and I think it's clear that this is a major milestone in the HR space in Ireland. In addition to the other major milestones we've already covered in terms of sick pay, pensions and retirement, contractor agreements, and so on. So at this stage, as I said, I'd like to briefly show you and introduce you to our new all-in-one HR software solution, HR Buddy Manager. And I guess the main ethos and driving force behind launching HR Buddy Manager was to save business owners and managers within businesses time, streamline processes, make things more effective and easier to manage. So I'm going to briefly run through what the system can do in terms of some of the powerful tools that are available in the system. Just important to say as well, we've got a lot of questions on some of those topics that have come in today. So what we'll do is we'll briefly run through the system and have some time to dig into some of the questions at the end as well. So now just going to show you firstly, just want to show you and log into what we have is a very intuitive dashboard. This gives you a snapshot of the key metrics that you want to quickly review as a manager or business owner. I know that many business owners, for instance, want to see the training adherence. They want to see the employees are live on the system, leave requests, probation reminders, the active users, bits and pieces like that. In terms of the people tabbed in, if you want to see who has signed contracts, who's awaiting for contracts to be signed, you can see all your active users. You can dig in and filter across the different status of employees, filter by role and so on. Filter if you have an external admin like a HR payroll person logging in and managing the system for you. In terms of the invites, so what that means is, I guess, the days of paper new starter forms, putting your personal details down on a piece of paper and sending into payroll, that's gone with the system. What you can do is you can get people to digitally onboard, and it just streamlines the whole process. You can also issue contracts within the system as well. And you can see who signed it, who hasn't signed it, if it's been partly signed. And you can also use the AI review tool within the system as well. Now, the AI review tool is actually really powerful. So in terms of, I guess, lots of people obviously will have contracts already in place within the business. So what you can do is you can take your current contracts and you can use our AI extraction tool to upload those details into your system. So when you're migrating your people to the system, for example, you can draft a contract of employment, put it into the contract of category of contracts, find an employee within the system, drag and drop the existing contract in there, and that's going to take their existing details and it's going to add them into their employee profile. You can also use the AI tool within the system to draft new contracts. What that's going to do is going to make it very straightforward. You just put in their details, the terms, the remuneration, pay and so on, the schedule, the working hours, the different policies that might be applied, which can be amended or changed based on the role and so on. And what you can do is you can draft the contract there in minutes, really, without the requirement for oversight from a HR person. Lots of times they'll go directly to the person, and you can see then if they've signed it and so on. Also then in the time entries, this is a really key piece. The system has very comprehensive time and attendance and leave requests modules in there. You can select if someone's taking leave, you can select the different types of leave. They can do this in terms of an employee self-service as well. You can also see in terms of clocking, so people can clock in, they can clock out, records breaks, cuts down the need for timesheets or manual entries and so on. And that's all stored then within the person's file locker within the system. So you can see then we have all our different users here. We can identify a person. We can log in here. As I said, in terms of the invite to the system, they can do lots of this themselves, updating their own personal information, putting in their own emergency contacts, their own bank details, file health declarations can be saved onto the file and so on, which is a better candidate and user experience, saves time for the managers and the administrators as well. In terms of, I guess, maybe one of my favorite features on the system is the learning and development piece, which is you can see here that you can upload different assignments into the system. We actually have some compliance training already preloaded into the system that you get free, but you can also create your own training. For example, if you want to have, for example, it could be a document, could be a health and safety module. You can set reminders for staff. So as we saw on the dashboard as well, then that you can get up-to-date real-time metrics on who has completed the training and who hasn't. So for example, here we can put in a health and safety training. We can add modules within that, whether that's the theory or so on. You can drag and drop videos in there as well. Also, a very key piece in terms of the time saving aspect of HR managers, that for anyone that's creating rosters on a weekly basis and publishing those, you can create and assign shifts to all of your team, update different types of leave. You can also create assign the shifts. You can duplicate a week. You can create templates within the system as well. So if you can create it once, that could be like a morning shift. It could be an office hours shift, evenings or weekends and so on. You create it for multiple days, single days, save the templates, and you'll be able to publish those to teams then. And because the platform is web-based, as I said, in terms of the clocking can be web-based or it can be geofenced to a particular location in terms of a physical terminal, we'd say, for example, which can be tied to biometrics. It can be tied to swipe cards, whichever way the client needs it set up for their particular business. Set the shifts. All of that is published then direct to mobile for your staff, so everyone has clarity on what the working hours are, and that will all feed into your time entries data and also into your report section within the system as well. So you get real-time data on working hours, your time and attendance, as you mentioned, breaks. That's all required from a compliance point of view. We've touched on today the gender pay gap reporting, the requirements, the increased threshold for reporting. There's a huge amount of information that's required and time needed to compile this data on an annual basis. So the system, as Damien outlined, we want to have it in there that you can actually see this data. You can generate your report and export it and publish that then with no time involved really. Another nice feature that's in the system is the announcements piece, which means that you can create a notification and push that out to the whole team. And very lastly, then just want to touch on that there is dedicated support within the module, within the platform as well. So if you have any issues with it, there's a whole center there as well. So just a couple of quick recaps. Contracts piece is very important. You can use AI to upload and create the contracts. There's roster management, shift planning, absence leave management, gender pay gap reporting, payroll ready exports from your report section, fully API integration into your payroll as well. Compliance training is free and built in, so we have the dignity and respect, diversity inclusion built into it, fully tracked and audited from a quality perspective if you need that for ISO compliance, the team communication messaging piece, as we mentioned as well. And you're moving away from paper-based and it's systems. So in terms of your secure file locker for all your staff, unlimited capacity scales as you grow, fully accessible, fully searchable, indexable, and assists with compliance compliance aspects of it, reduces error in terms of your contracting shifts and so on, your learning and development, enhance your decision making because you have that real-time data on your dashboard, whether that's time and attendance, probations, training, contracts being electronically sent out to staff so they can receive the contract, review it, approve it. It's saved into their file locker then. So I guess it's ease of use, saves you time, which is as I said, is the main ethos behind launching the software. The Help Center is available, 14-day free trial, and we're available as well if anyone wants to have a more in-depth run through the system, see what I can do, see how can I help your business, just reach out and let us know. So that's just a very whistle-stop tour of the software. And yeah, thanks Minnie for listening and going through all those topics with us today, folks. We have quite a lot of questions. I don't know if we'll have time to get to all of them today. If
Yeah,
there's
we've there's a lot of questions there. Preach, do you want to do
Yes,
one or two questions, and I can do all the rest of them. We'll
yeah,
fly
no,
through.
there was a couple of quick ones there. So somebody asked what website is the gender pay gap data details logged on, please. So at the moment, it's your own website or a publicly accessible form that you should have that gender pay gap information. But I do believe this year the government is to launch like a portal or a new website where that information could be uploaded, kind of similar to the auto enrollment. But as I said, we will have more details of that on an ongoing basis. Somebody asked a question about the statutory sick pay. So they have like 10 days of sick leave at 100% in the salary. And they're asking about does the days of statutory sick pay get applied after the 10 days of sick leave has been exhausted? So it's important to note that if you have your own sick leave policy and that is more favorable than the statutory sick pay, that's what would apply. So if you have 10 days, the person can't get the 10 days and then go get the statutory sick pay on top of that. And then somebody else asked, is it okay to just state that statutory sick pay can be paid in line of legislation rather than listing in the handbook? Yes, and if I didn't mention that during the presentation, that's a really important line to put into your handbook, that the company will pay in line with statutory sick pay legislation or in line with legislation. It's a good line to put in because it kind of covers that off. I can check if I have other questions. Do you want to answer a few as well?
I'll fire ahead here. So easy one to start with. Can we print the slides? We'll send the slides of this presentation to all the attendees, and we'll send the recording of the webinar as well to you. Okay, so you'll be able to go back over this. So with regards to the contractors, then someone asked if you have contractors based outside of Ireland in both EU and non-EU countries, does what we're talking about this morning apply? So what we're talking about this morning applies to Irish legislation, okay? If you've contractors in other countries, it's the legislation in that country. Okay, so if they're in the EU, more than likely it's very similar legislation because it's EU directives that are transposing this legislation in the first place. But you need to check in the particular country and employment legislation in that country with regards to that. Okay, so Breach answered the statutory sick pay question, and there was a question asked then about the pension auto enrollment and the statutory instrument that was implemented, where the threshold for private pensions must be 3.5%. So the question is, so now employers are paying 3% now into private pension scheme must pay 3.5%. Yes, but it's between the employer and the employee altogether. So to meet the 3.5%, the employer must be paying a minimum of 1.5. If the employee is paying 2, 1.5 and 2 is 3.5. So it's between the employer. The 3.5 is employer and employee added together. The employer cannot pay less than 1.5%. Okay, I hope that answers that question. More favorable pension scheme, you've answered that, haven't you, Breach? Yeah. The employees who have more pension scheme, but only available from 6 months. So pension auto enrollment starts once the employee is between 20 and 63 and meets the threshold of €20,000. Probations and all of that don't matter. So the answer to the question is yes. What are your thoughts on enforcing retirement age at 66? Does this still need objective justification? Like the state pension age of 66 isn't included in the legislation. The legislation is protecting people before 66. So having a retirement age of 66 in your terms and conditions of employment, really, it's fair enough. Like there has to be retirement ages set out. So there isn't a problem there. But if it's under 66, you have a problem. Okay. And you need to address it. Does the calculation of gross pay for the 3.5% minimum pension contribute include bonuses? Example, a salary of 40k, annual performance bonus of 3k is total gross 43k, and minimum combined pension contribution must be 3.5% of this. So the short answer to that is yes. The gross pay includes things like overtime and bonuses and things like that. That is included in gross pay when the 3.5%. So you're looking there in your example from that individual of the 43k, 3.5% of 43k as opposed to 3.5% of the 40k. Okay, so the sick leave at 10 days is okay. Breach dealt with that. You dealt with the website as well. So there's a portal coming for employers for the gender pay gap reporting. Can general years of experience still be biased? There's a few questions on that on the pay transparency. So with the pay transparency, we will get more detail on it and stipulations and clarity when the legislation is coming in. But what I would say about the pay transparency and in organising it, because there's another question as well about, workers in different markets, but they may be in the same job roles. Like pay transparency is basically going to be, I suppose the example is like if you have a male and a female, the same job title, the same terms and conditions of employment, and one is being paid 60k and the other is being paid 55k. There's something wrong. You're not going to meet the test. But this is why employers have to look at their employment contracts, their job titles now, and I suppose again advertisements into the future. How you stipulate things is going to be very, very important. So if you're paying one person 60k and you want to justify paying someone else 80k, you're going to have to clearly show that from the job advertisement why that was the case, and that it isn't bias, that it is, their experience, their qualifications. But is that something that you make up during the recruitment process yourself? And we need to be able to recruit people and hire the right people, and employees can hold employers to ransom as well and say that they want a certain amount of money. And I don't fully agree with this legislation. I think it's over the top, but we have to plan and organise how we communicate and document and define and stipulate pay ranges, job salaries, how they're advertised, employment contracts, job titles, job roles, and all that type of thing. Unfortunately, I suppose HR people, HR departments and people managers are going to have to put a little bit of work into this to protect their organizations from bias and from this being tested. Like every other piece of legislation, like the right to request remote working, it isn't really until it's tested at the WRC we find out the real truth behind the legislation, and how favourable it is actually to the employees, or how much wiggle room there is within it for employers. Okay. So regarding pay transparency, if there is, for example, a pay difference because the person on more money bought experience. So again, that's I suppose a similar question. You need to have it clearly stipulated and defined. If someone from the outside can read the job advertisement and see, they can take the view that it's not bias. If that's not clear, really, if it's tested, you may be in hot water. Regarding pay transparency, if an organisation has an entity in Northern Ireland, UK, and some other EU countries, does this apply to them also? Same as the previous question on contractors, the legislation within the region is what's relevant. If it's an EU country, most likely under the EU directives, it's a very similar piece of legislation, but it's legislation relevant to that state. Okay, so there can be little differences in legislation, but in any EU country, they're similar, at least. The UK can be quite different. Under the Pay Transparency Directive, can you ask a candidate what their salary expectations are? I suppose salary is kind of off the table inside in under this new law inside in the recruitment process, because there is the possibility of that you're being biased. So you would have to be careful in that regard. Can employees still raise it? Yes, but what's happening through the law is that under the Transparency Directive, it will be clearly stipulated what the salary range is in job ads. So why would you be going outside that? Because you're only bringing yourself into a troublesome area. Is there a central authorised list of pay thresholds for the joint pay assessment? I'm not sure I actually follow that question, no, to be honest with you, so I'm not sure on that. But again, if you want to get onto this for more clarity, please do. Also regarding pension contributions, I may have misinterpreted what was said, but if a private company pension is 3% employer and 3% employee, so 6% total, is this an issue? No, it's not. It's 3%, and there was a similar question to that. It's 3.5% between employer and employee. The employer cannot be under 1.5%, and employer and employee contributions must meet 3.5% of the gross salary. So if the employer is 1.5% and the employee is 2%, that's 3.5%, and you're okay. Can you justify pay differences for work of equal value through market differences? So I just touched on that there through a similar question as well. Again, employment contracts, how it's stipulated, there's work to be done on this. So if it's tested, it's clearly set out in job advertisements, employment contracts, and so on, that there isn't a bias. That's what it's going to be about. Is there a HR? But just the last question, someone said thank you, and thanks for everyone coming here this morning. It's gone 12 o'clock, so we'd finish up with this. Is there a HR manager mobile app for employees to request leave, etc., from their phones and receive communications from line managers? Yes, there's an app that can be used on phones for the HR Buddy Manager app, so employees can clock in, clock out, request holidays, and all that type of thing, remotely or on their phones and so on. You can put the HR Buddy Manager app geolocated, fence it, put iPads and tablets on walls if you wish. Use it on your laptop and so on, or desktop, and use it on a mobile app. So there's an app available as well. Okay. I think we got through all the questions. So well done, everyone, and great attendance this morning. Look, it's hard we can't, I suppose, make everyone an expert. There might be more questions than answers. The webinars are to inform you so that you can be compliant to get things right. If you need more help, the HR Buddy team is here to help. info@hrbuddy.ie. You can call us as well, or go to our website, fill out a contact form. We'll send out the slides from today's webinar and the recording to you. And thanks to everyone for attending this morning. And stay in touch if you have any questions. We're glad to support. Thanks, guys. Okay, we'll finish with that, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Breach. Well done. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Sloan.